see, I didn't become a star overnight. It was a gradual thing. I had a lot of background behind me.
Men saw my mother as Gilda and not as Rita Hayworth.
Hi friends, it's Gab. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. In today's video, I'm going to be introducing a new series on my channel titled Beyond the Real. Throughout this series, I hope to just talk about some different old Hollywood icons and events in hopes of peeling back that prestigious, glamorous layer and showing you the scarier, darker side of the old Hollywood image. In today's episode in specific, I'll be discussing Rita Hayworth. Not only is she a personal favorite of mine, but she also happens to be the perfect example of Hollywood royalty and tragedy. Please consider the following trigger warnings before continuing with the video. Mentions of physical, mental, and sexual abuse, mentions of alcoholism, mentions of depression, and child endangerment. If you choose to continue, I hope you enjoy, and welcome to Rita Hayworth's story. Rita Hayworth was born Margarita Carmen Gansino in Brooklyn, New York on October 17th of 1918. The third child and only daughter of Eduardo Gansino and Volga Hayworth, Rita had a turbulent childhood. Her father, Eduardo Gansino, was born in a small town on the outskirts of Seville, Spain, and her mother, Volga Hayworth, was of Irish and English descent. Her father was a second-generation classical Spanish dancer, and her mother enjoyed the hobby as well. Throughout Rita's childhood, it is reported that she was frequently sexually abused by her father, and it is also said that her mother would even get in bed with her just to either decrease or stop the abuse. From the minute that Rita could walk, her father was teaching her the art of dancing. Eduardo really wanted Rita to follow in his family's footsteps. Not only was Eduardo himself a professional dancer, but his father, Rita's paternal grandfather, Antonio Cancino, was a famous Spanish classical dancer. He owned a very prestigious dancing school in Spain, and so it was kind of a given that Rita would follow in her family's footsteps. So while her two brothers went to school, Rita focused the majority of her time throughout her childhood on taking dance lessons given to her by her grandfather. Later in life, it was said that Rita never truly enjoyed the dance lessons that she was kind of forced to take as a child. It was kind of just what was thrown at her from the minute she could walk. She often wished that she had a simpler childhood, kind of just running around and being a kid, but she was forced to take dance lessons for hours and hours on end every single day, which kind of hindered her in a lot of different ways. She was always too afraid to admit to her father and her grandfather that she wasn't particularly interested in dancing, so she kind of just continued taking the dance lessons anyway. Right before her 5th birthday, Rita was invited to be a part of the off-Broadway production of the Greenwich Village Follies, and then in 1926, when she turned 8 years old, she was featured in La Fiesta, which was a short film production by Warner Brothers. Her father and her aunt also had roles in this little musical production. The following year, her father moved the family of 5 to Hollywood, California. His hopes were that their dancing talent would lead them to either film roles or some sort of entertainment industry job. During the family's first few years in Hollywood, California, Eduardo, her father, actually ended up opening a prestigious dancing school where he ended up teaching dance to well-known names such as James Cagney and Jean Harlow. In 1931, when Rita was only 12, her father's dreams of her being a big star were still alive, so he joined together with his daughter to form a dancing duo by the name of the Dancing Canzinos. At the time though, California law deemed Rita far too young to perform at nightclubs, which was kind of where the Dancing Canzinos would make the biggest money and contributions. So instead, Eduardo decided to travel with his daughter to Tijuana, Mexico, where they would play at nightclubs and clubs. Tijuana at that time was a very popular tourist destination for Californians. It was a very popular spot throughout the entire 1930s and 1940s. It was for a long time how Rita and Eduardo made money. Rita suddenly became kind of the breadwinner of her family, so her two brothers continued to go to school. She kind of took lessons in between her dance classes, but it was a very hard schedule. It is said that she would do anywhere from 2 to 4 shows every day. Rita was never really fond of this time of her life. She remembers a lot of long nights and long days of just working nonstop and not being a normal 12-year-old kid. So this was never a time that Rita enjoyed. Throughout this time of Eduardo and Rita frequently traveling to Tijuana, it was also said that her father continued to sexually abuse her, even going kind of as far as dressing her in very provocative, sexy clothes and calling her his wife. So as you can imagine, this was a very hard and turbulent time for Rita, and even though her dancing abilities improved, her quality of life kind of just decreased by the day. She had a very, very tough time. She had a lot of pressure put on her, and it definitely affected her young adult years. At the tender age of 16, while she was dancing at a club called Caliente, a Fox executive producer saw her dancing and was instantly intrigued by her. He asked her father if Rita could possibly screen test for the Fox company. At first, her father was kind of hesitant, but then he let her. During her time at Fox, Rita was always cast as the exotic role, either the foreigner or just an exotic persona in general. In late 1934, she performed a dance sequence in a movie called Dante's Inferno, and then her first speaking role was in 1935, where she played an Argentinian girl. That same year, she also played an Egyptian girl in another movie, and then following that, she played a Russian dancer in another film. She was kind of always encouraged to look more classic American so that she would get more roles. Nonetheless, Rita was very, very happy with where she was in her career, and although she was really camera shy, Rita was always said to be a very, very shy, timid person. She was definitely enjoying the fact that she was able to make money for her family by doing these exotic roles. Throughout this time, the Fox executive producer continued grooming her in hopes of her playing a lead in a Technicolor film called Ramona. Though by the end of her contract, Fox merged with 20th Century Fox, and they also got a new executive producer on board. This new executive producer quickly dismissed the previous producer's kind of hopes of having Rita play the lead role in Ramona. He just said that she was far too young, and he ended casting someone else instead, which was something that was really, really heartbreaking for Rita. But she eventually moved on, and then after that, she was also dismissed from the company in general. Like I mentioned earlier, Rita was never really an outgoing person. Although she played outgoing roles, she was always kind of an introvert and very timid, so she always relied on other people to see her in the right direction, and she just always wanted that person that she could rely on. So during this time, she met a man called Edward Charles Judson. Judson was someone who clearly supported Rita, especially in the very beginning. He really supported her career, and this was something that she sought, mostly because she never had that huge support base. The only person that ever really pushed her far enough was her father. She looked for very paternal figures in her life, and Edward Judson just happened to be someone who pushed her in the right direction, and she fell in love with that idea. So Rita and Edward ended up eloping in 1937. At that time, Rita was 18 and Edward Judson was 40. Although there was a lot of hesitation and fear surrounding their obvious huge age gap and relationship, Judson did play a huge role in launching Rita's career. He believed in her a lot and saw her on-screen potential like no one else did at that time. While Rita was out of a job and obviously not connected to Fox Studios anymore, Judson took the money that she had saved and kind of just booked her freelance work with other studios, kind of B productions. He also had her do a lot of photo shoots, a lot of magazine covers, kind of just trying to expose her in any way he could. And it worked. Rita actually ended up getting the attention of Columbia Pictures. But before we continue with Rita's kind of journey with Columbia, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the relationship between her and Edward Judson. Throughout the relationship, there were rumors that Judson was extremely possessive and controlling of Rita. He actually forced her to transfer over $10,000 in property to his name under threats that he could cause her physical harm. In 1942, Rita finally filed for divorce due to cruelty. By the end of their marriage, Edward Judson had taken most of Rita's money, leaving her homeless and seeking help from family and friends. Now that we're back on the timeline, let's continue with Rita's time at Columbia Pictures. So Rita actually ended up getting the attention of the Columbia Pictures head. Harry Cohn. He signed her on a 7-year contract with the company. Although this seemed like a good step for Rita and her career, her friends and family were kind of concerned about the relationship that she was about to embark on with Harry Cohn, given that he had a very crude reputation for being very controlling, manipulative, and just in general a very, very mean-spirited person. During her first few days at the Columbia Pictures studio, Harry Cohn started grooming Rita. He started making comments about how her image was far too Mediterranean, so he wanted her to change her appearance as much as possible. He also frequently said that her name sounded too Spanish, so he ended up forcing her to change her name from Rita Canzino to Rita Hayworth. She took her mother's maiden name, which at first made her father furious, but he ended up being okay with it because it was going to help her career in the long run. With the encouragement from Harry Cohn, Rita actually ended up dyeing her hair a bright red color, which ended up being a signature look for her. And she also had electrolysis to raise her hairline, giving her a more classic American face. By the year 1938, Rita had appeared in 10 different Columbia Picture productions. By the early 1940s, Harry Cohn continued to kind of push Rita out there. He had her star in films such as Music in My Heart, The Lady in Question, and Angels Over Broadway. During that same year, she was actually featured in a Life magazine cover story, offering her even more exposure. Because Harry Cohn practically owned her, he wanted to capitalize off of his creation as much as possible, so he loaned her to other film studios. During a certain time, Rita actually spent a lot of film production time over at Warner Brothers, and this is when she starred in the film The Strawberry Blonde, where she played the second female lead opposite of James Cagney. After she returned to Columbia Pictures in 1941, she starred in a musical called You'll Never Get Rich. During this time, she played opposite of Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire was a huge name at that point in Hollywood, so the fact that Rita was going to play his female lead was a huge kind of step in her career. It was also going to be Columbia's most high-budgeted film at that time. The film ended up becoming so successful that the studio ended up producing and releasing another Hayworth and Astaire duo movie the following year. Although Fred Astaire had previously made about 10 films with the actress Ginger Rogers, he was caught saying in a couple of interviews that his most magnetic and just well-rounded partner in general had always been Rita. He really enjoyed working with her. He always called her a very talented and poised dancer, and that was something that meant a lot to Rita because she knew that Ginger was also a very talented dancer, and he had also danced with a lot of other talented people, so the fact that he spoke so highly of her really did mean a lot to her, and it spoke very highly of her to the audience as well. In August of 1941, Rita actually had her photo taken by Life magazine. In this photo, she wore a black lace bodice, and it actually became the most popular photo during the World War II years. The photo kind of became a magnet for the soldiers wanting to go home. It became a symbol of home in America, and she became this icon almost overnight. Like previously stated, the photo became a phenomenon, and Rita suddenly became the most sought out pinup girl ever. And then she also was immortalized forever as the Goddess of Love, which was a title that Rita found very, very hard to live up to. But it wasn't just the attention of war soldiers Rita's pinup photo captured. Filmmaker Orson Welles became enamored by Rita and everything that she stood for. Orson Welles had a very distinctive reputation in the film industry, so his pursuit of Rita kind of became impossible for her to deny. She was very flattered by it. In September of 1943, Rita and Orson actually ended up getting married in front of a judge. This marriage was really out of the blue. It ended up shocking a lot of people. They actually got married while Rita was filming CoverGirl. They left the studio, went to get married, and came back. It confused a lot of people, mostly because a lot of them didn't even know that Rita and Orson were in a relationship, let alone in a relationship where marriage was the potential outcome. During this time, it was really the peak of Rita's career. Every film studio wanted her, every film director dreamed of her being in their film, but Rita kind of just wanted a simple, secure life. She wanted to settle down, have a family, and it wasn't exactly what Orson wanted. Her entire life up until this point felt kind of like a constant battle between her just wanting a simple, fulfilling, happy life versus others wanting her to be in the spotlight. Harry Cohn was one of those people that was absolutely furious when he heard about her marriage to Orson Welles, and he was actually even more furious when he found out that Rita was expecting her first child, especially given that she was at the peak of her success. Rita's first daughter, Rebecca Wells, was born on December 17th of 1944. Throughout Rita and Orson's 4 years of marriage, it seemed like Rita kind of just wanted the simple things in life. She wanted love, a marriage, a happy family life, and just a lot of security and a typical home life. But Orson didn't want the same things. He often left Rita to take care of Rebecca by herself, and he kind of just wanted to be very involved in his career and in the film industry. Orson just never really wanted to settle down. He, again, was a very successful film producer, so he was often on set, he was often taking work trips, and he was just never really interested in the relationship. He never put a lot of effort into it, and then later in life he even admitted that he wished he hadn't even gotten married in the first place. Their marriage was truly beginning to fall apart, and then after Rita found out about Orson's several encounters with different women, she filed for divorce, and their divorce was final in 1947. Kind of backtracking to Rita's actual career, she was a huge star in the 1940s. Her career continued to skyrocket, and then particularly in 1944 she had one of the top billing roles in the massive Technicolor film CoverGirl. After this film, Rita was officially kind of established as Columbia Pictures' top star of the 1940s. CoverGirl actually also established her as the first of 6 women to ever dance on screen with both Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. For 3 consecutive years, starting in 1944, Rita was named as one of the top movie box attractions in the entire world. Her most glamorous and sexy appeal was seen in Charles Vitter's film noir Gilda, where she played the ultimate femme fatale opposite of Glenn Ford.
Gilda, are you decent?
Me? Sure, I'm decent.
The film released in 1946, and it honestly pushed her fame to the extreme. Gilda was really the film that changed the way the public really saw Rita. She was no longer Margarita Cancino, Rita Cancino, or even Rita Hayworth. She would forever be immortalized as Gilda, a fictional persona that Rita unfortunately never was able to live up to. Moving on to 1947, Rita had a role in The Lady of Shanghai, where her performance was critically acclaimed, but it also failed in the box office. A lot of this failure was kind of accredited to Rita's huge change, physical change. Her hair had been cut short and bleached blonde. And of course, as we all know, Rita's kind of iconic look was her red locks. So this massive and abrupt change brought a lot of negativity to the film and to Rita. Harry Cohn was also never told about this change, and he was later said to have been furious when her iconic image was just altered, you know, so abruptly. In 1948, at the height of her fame, Rita traveled to France to the Cannes Film Festival, and that is where she was introduced to Muslim Prince Ali Khan. They actually began a year-long courtship, which was highly publicized, especially because both parties were still married to other people. But after their divorces were finalized, the couple was married in 1949. After their wedding, Rita kind of just dropped her entire career and moved to France to follow the love of her life. The wedding of Rita Hayworth and Prince Ali Khan was actually the first time a American actress had ever become a princess, which was a huge deal. But nonetheless, Rita's continuous yearn for privacy and a more settled lifestyle clashed with Ali Khan's kind of prestigious, busy ways of living. After all, he was a prince, so his lifestyle was very chaotic and high profile, which is not something that Rita ever wanted. She was kind of trying to run away from all of that. So to find out that her new life was also kind of even more chaotic, it never really settled right with her. She never fit in with Ali Khan's group of friends and his family, and she found it very hard to fit in with the French culture in general. The prince was also said to be a playboy, so he was photographed with numerous women, which broke Rita's heart over and over and over again. Nonetheless, in December of 1949, Rita gave birth to the couple's only child and Rita's second daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan. After just 2 years as Princess Margarita Ali Khan, Rita took her 2 young daughters and moved back to New York. In September of 1951, Rita filed for divorce on the grounds of extreme mental abuse. During the custody battle for their daughter, Rita wanted Jasmine to be brought up as Christian, while Ali Khan wanted her to be brought up in the Muslim faith. Rita denied his offer of $1 million to turn their daughter to the Muslim faith, and she also denied his kind of plan of wanting both Yasmin and Rebecca to travel to Europe to be with him for 2 or 3 months out of the year. It was said that Rita never wanted to go back to Hollywood. Yasmin herself actually said in an interview years later that her mother was never truly interested in going back to that lifestyle, but she was the single mother of 2 young daughters now, so she had to be brave and swallow her pride and find a way to provide for her 2 young children.
I'm thrilled to be back home again, and I'm most grateful for the very warm reception that you all have given me. And of course I'm most anxious for my children to see America.
She returned to Colombia and to the abusive hands of Harry Cohn. Harry Cohn, said to be a very revengeful person, offered her a lot of mediocre roles, which slowly kind of picked at Rita's spirit a little bit. She was well aware that the roles that she was being offered weren't all that great, but again, she had to swallow her pride and do the roles, especially after the fact that she had broken her contract with Columbia prior to leaving to France, so she kind of had a lot of ground to make up for, and she also had, again, her 2 young daughters to provide for. So she took on those roles, but they were definitely mediocre and not up to par with Rita's career levels. During the following year, she continued to star in a ring of average films, which included her comeback film, Affair in Trinidad. Around this time, Rita actually met an Argentinian singer by the name of Dick Himes. Whenever Rita would show up at the clubs that he was playing at, he would attract a much larger crowd, which definitely caught his attention. During the time that Rita started seeing Dick, he was in a lot of financial and legal trouble. Both of his previous wives were actually taking legal action against him for not paying child support, and in 1954, one of his wives actually put out a warrant for his arrest for not paying said child support. Soon after he met Rita, the US government actually wanted to deport him back to Argentina, but Dick thought that Rita could kind of persuade the government to keep him in the United States. After Rita became responsible for Dick's citizenship, they quickly married in court, even though this was against the advice of every single one of Rita's friends. They were married in 1953, but Dick's financial problems only increased, and at one point he even owed more than $100,000 to the IRS. The months that followed were some of the most fearful in Rita's life, mostly because she was getting threats from Ali Khan about her daughters, and at the same time she was experiencing the threats from deputies and the US government about Dick Himes' financial issues. Due to the fact that Rita did attract more attention during Dick's shows, he kind of just wanted her to travel around with him. During one of these trips, Rita left her 2 young daughters with Dick's mother. Without her acknowledgement, his mother left the 2 young girls alone at home one day, and the incident was reported to child services. They decided to charge Rita with child neglect, an event that would forever change her entire life. At this point, Rita hadn't worked in 2 years, so she was out of money and in need of paying court and other legal fees. She was then forced to sell her part of the production company that she had founded years prior, and eventually she was able to have a little bit of money to pay her court fees. During the court hearing, both Ali Khan and Orson Welles showed up and spoke in her defense, which played a massive part in helping her charges get dropped. In 1955, after a turbulent and exhausting 2 years together, Dick actually ended up smacking Rita across the face in public, which was the last straw. It was the event that caused Rita to pack her bags and walk out with her 2 young daughters. That assault was actually said to have cost her a great deal of pain and trauma. It also was something that affected her for years to come. She was off screen for a total of 4 years during her marriage to Dick Himes, and when she returned to the screen in 1957, Kim Novak had already become Columbia's top star as well as the face of old Hollywood. After her appearance in Pal Joy, Rita waved her final goodbyes to Columbia Pictures. She also decided to break off her relationship with Harry Cohn once and for all. I think it's actually really important to point out some of the issues that Rita had with Columbia Pictures before moving on with the story. In 1943, the studio actually refused to pay her for a total of 9 weeks because she refused to be in a 1940s fantasy film called Once Upon a Time. In general, there just seemed to be a lot of issues with her getting paid the amount that she either 1, deserved, and 2, that Columbia had promised to pay her in the first place. These disagreements tend to be a recurring theme in old Hollywood, and I think it's something that I'm definitely going to talk about in the near future. She also several times claimed that she felt like she was owned by not only the company but by Harry Cohn. Once she even called him a monster and a very possessive man. Moving on to our timeline, in 1958, while Rita was determined to be taken seriously as an actress, she quickly gained the support of James Hill. James Hill was a very popular film producer, and during the production of Separate Tables, which was one of Hill's most popular and major productions and one of Rita's last major films, they actually ended up getting married. Once again, while Rita yearned for a life full of simple, private moments, James Hill seemed to be completely consumed by his career and his company. He really just wanted Rita to be the center of every one of his films, and he exploited her for a very long time. In general, the relationship actually just ended up leaving Rita feeling very betrayed and used. Her relationship with James Hill was said to be extremely toxic and violent. It was said that they argued more often than not, and that while they were drinking, their arguments got extremely physical. While they were producing and filming the 1959 Western They Came to Gordura, James Hill and Rita ended up getting into an extremely heated argument, which ended with Hill pushing and hitting Rita, which ended up leaving a huge bruise on her face. The next day, while she was getting her makeup done, her makeup artist, who also happened to be a good friend of hers, asked about the bruise and whether or not her husband had hit her, to which Rita replied with, "Yes, he happens to hit me a lot." That wasn't the only incident though. In his autobiography, actor Charlton Heston wrote about James Hill's and Rita Hayworth's relationship. The actor actually once went on a double date with James Hill and Rita, which eventually ended up turning into one of the most embarrassing nights of his life. He experienced Hill verbally abusing Rita to the point of bringing her to tears. Heston wrote that him and his wife just ended up leaving the table, which was a decision that he later regretted because he wished that he would have stayed by Rita's side and stood up for her, but they were just in so much shock, so he just decided to back out of the situation. But he definitely pointed out the fact that the relationship was extremely toxic and vile. In 1961, Rita ended up filing for divorce due to extreme mental and physical abuse. At this point, Rita was finally free to live the life that she always wanted, free of any restraints and responsibilities. But her happiness would be shortly outlived. Right after her divorce with James Hill, Rita started showing signs of an unknown illness. It began with her losing her short-term memory, then it progressed to very random outburst of anger, and then it finally led to the illness affecting her professional life. In 1961, Rita actually wanted to challenge herself and star in the Broadway production of Step on a Crack, but she actually found that she was unable to remember most of the dialogue. After about a week of reciting and practicing, the production actually ended up deciding not to go through with her. She continued to search for different roles throughout the 1960s, but after hearing that she relied heavily on the help from cue cards to remember her lines films and studios were reluctant to take her on. Her last film was The Wrath of God, which released in 1972. Rita's behavior and health continued to decline. There were a lot more random outbursts of anger, and just like in previous years, she relied heavily on alcohol to drown out her pain. In 1976, Rita's battle with Alzheimer's disease became public knowledge when she went through a disorienting and uncontrollable episode during a flight to London. She was hospitalized soon after, which finally allowed her close friends and family to take care of her needs the way she never allowed them to do previous to the episode. The last few years of Rita's life were heartbreaking. She spent most of them in and out of hospitals, consumed by her awful illness. During the last few days of her life, she was bedridden, unable to walk, talk, or even just control regular bodily functions. Rita Hayworth died in her home in New York City on May 17th, 1987 due to complications of Alzheimer's disease. For someone who loved to live her life laughing and dancing, coming to terms with that same life being cut so drastically short was almost unbearable. Although she left behind one of the most iconic old Hollywood legacies, Rita Hayworth never truly got what she wanted out of life: a stable home life with someone who loved her unconditionally by her side. Instead, she spent most of her life aching to escape controlling relationships, heartbreaking loss, the confining grasp of fame, and at the end, the prison of her own mind. Rita Hayworth's fight with Alzheimer's disease brought a lot more funding and attention towards the illness, which had little to no attention prior to her battle with it. Her daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, started a benefit in honor of the Alzheimer's Association, the Rita Hayworth Gala, which happens twice a year in Chicago and New York City. As of 2017, more than $72 million has been raised for Alzheimer's disease in honor of Rita Hayworth's name. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that it helped shine some light onto not only Rita Hayworth's legacy, but also the incredible pressures that were put onto the old Hollywood celebrities to lead a seemingly perfect life. I hope to make some more videos in this series soon. And if you did like this episode, make sure to like this video. It would help me a whole lot. Also, make sure to subscribe and to hit that notification bell to be notified when I post any new videos. Thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.